In studio, we want to have a conversation on business process outsourcing, and to have this conversation is Vinay Subbaramaiah. Did I say that right? Yes, he is the BPO director at Technobrain. Welcome on set.
Thank you. Thank you.
Karibu sana. So let's just start with this. What is business process outsourcing?
Right.
Yes.
So business process outsourcing typically, or people with a misunderstanding, thinks that it's all about contact centers or the call centers. So basically, business process outsourcing is not just limited to call center. Call center is one part of the complete gamut of business process outsourcing. So anything which is a non-core activity for any organization or an institution, which can be performed by an outsourcing partner who can supplement in terms of the cost of operation to compensate in terms of any challenges that is associated with handling it in-house, is what business process outsourcing is all about.
And what are these kind of things that can be outsourced under BPO?
Right. See,
well, of course, apart from the call centers that you've mentioned.
Right.
Yeah.
See, all these things started when call center took as a boom. But even prior to that, even in a manufacturing industry where some of the ancillary components are being produced by a third-party vendor, it is still an outsourcing. When you design a component, it's still an outsourcing. When you do a bit of market research by a third-party vendor, it's still an outsourcing. So you have the need of a particular service, but you're not doing some of the activities associated with that service. You're engaging a third-party vendor, that's still an outsourcing. So when you talk of an outsourcing as to what it is, it can start from a prospect acquisition in a sales cycle and trying to onboard a customer and handling any technical queries or any support related queries to any of the services, doing market research, doing business process re-engineering, handling any collections, or even doing a bit of market research, handling the procurement cycle, the accounts payable, receivables, procurement, sourcing of vendor. The list goes on.
Yeah, you can literally outsource anything.
Exactly.
All right. So how is this industry performing in the country right now?
I wouldn't say badly, but there is a lot of good things that is happening for Kenya to take advantage of it. And as much it is, there is a promise being given out to the global market that Kenya is a good destination for any of these players who is looking for an outsourcing requirement to come and engage with players in this country, because some of the basic things that are needed is a good infrastructure, a stable economy, the resources who can actually diligently deliver those services which a buyer is looking for.
Let's talk about BPO in IT. I believe that's where you largely major in. BPO in IT, apart from the call centers, what else can you outsource in IT?
See, one of the most important things that's happening is now everyone is talking of artificial intelligence, machine learning, developing newer applications, getting into automation, because everyone wants to see how they can be doing certain things smartly than in terms of putting a lot of effort. So to do that, you need a lot of development work to be done. You need a lot of automation, back-end data to be fed into. So this is an area which is taking a lot of prominence of late. And that's where even Kenya as country, we are doing very well.
We're doing very well. So do we have the labor, the skilled labor that is required?
We wouldn't say that the skilled labor is readily available, but you have the basic ingredients to make the labor or the workforce ready for this. So because of the prominence given to the education, prominence given to the graduation here, and many pursuing business IT or agricultural IT, or having an interface with an IT skill is giving a lot of momentum for them to be taken into that domain and train further to make sure they are employable ready for such requirements.
Let's delve further into the labor issue, the human resource part of it. How well paid are the professionals in this industry in Kenya compared to the global, market?
See, one of the key important things for attracting the buyers to a new geography will be the cost of operation.
Yes.
When you talk about outsourcing, for that matter, some sort of outsourcing started happening onshore, because when you look into the buyer market for these things, it is majorly an American player or an European player from European continent. So for them to outsource, they started looking at markets which can deliver this work or develop this work at a cost-effective manner, but yet with very good quality. So that's how India took a lead, and then Philippines took a lead in terms of doing such work. And thereafterwards, there has been countries in the near shore like Mexico, Guatemala, and some other countries which are closely associated in terms of culture as well as the living lifestyle associated with America, took a lead as well. So even in that spectrum, Africa was not that much considered, apart from bits and pieces of work being done in South Africa. Later, some part of Egypt taking that lead. Right now, Kenya and in fact countries like Ghana, Rwanda, they're also coming into the play in terms of how we can cope up with these requirements and serviceability.
So Kenya is now coming into the market strongly.
Definitely. In terms of going back to the question of how competitive or how compensative it is,
Yes.
See, obviously, like I mentioned, the price competitiveness is the key advantage for a buyer to look into a new geography. So in that way, Kenya is not that pricey in comparison to the initial worlds of outsourcing who took up, like whether it is in India or Philippines, which are now heading towards a market of knowledge process outsourcing, and the cost of operation or cost of delivery is at a higher end in comparison to what we are trying to catch up with. Because again, it also goes with a lot of investment being put to make sure that the quality of service and also the attrition, the retaining of the talent who come to start working in such projects are being held, so that it doesn't become a false economy for a buyer to come to a newer destination.
When you say that, that looks like an advantage for the buyers, so to say. But for the professionals in the industry, it doesn't sound like an advantage for them, because they are doing, give or take, even better work, but at a lower cost. And don't you think that the Kenyan industry risks losing this talent to, better paying markets like Europe or even the US?
I wouldn't say so, because when you look into the buyer market, there is not much of a buyer market for these skills at the moment, locally, domestically. So I mean, there has been instances where I have met with a lot of individuals who have done business IT or business agricultural IT, and they're doing some odd jobs like driving or doing some sort of support roles, right? So despite having an ambition to pursue an IT degree or a professional course or a diploma, when you are lacking the chance and the opportunity to work in the stream which you have aspired to learn, was something which was lacking. But with the advent of these players coming into the market and trying to look for the resources here which can deliver those requirements of these organizations, there is an opportunity which is getting created for those talents. So somebody who would have a degree but not an applicational ability to implement whatever the person has learned was very much there. So now with these companies coming in here, you're actually getting an opportunity to execute the skills that you have learned in the college or in the school, and then try to make a living out of it. So obviously it will give that paradigm shift. I mean, even when you look into some of the economies which is dependent on the outsourcing, like Philippines or India, see, this paradigm shift happened 2-3 decades ago, when probably a son started earning more than what a father could earn in his 30 years of service, because of the advent of international buyers coming into that market looking for more skilled labor in terms of developing these applications, testing these applications, and things of that sort. So I wouldn't say that it's actually cannibalizing in terms of the talents getting lesser paid, but I would say definitely they're getting a decent line of earning, as well as a better exposure to the worldly requirements in terms of those applications.
And how high is the demand for these services?
With the global pandemic, what happened, especially the US market started providing a lot of freebies to their citizens, which made, it's a witness what we have seen. When we participated in some events in the US, it was even very hard to find Uber drivers coming in, because they were being given with some perks for survival, and nobody really wanted to work. Whereas on the other side, from where we represented, from Kenya, we were looking for opportunities where these people can outsource their requirements so that we can deliver them. So when you look into that kind of disparity, there is a lot of demand that is there. It's only that we need to market it, we need to package it in a much better structure, talking about all the other advantages of the geography that which can offer, so that we can attract more buyers to come and engage with the talents what we have in this country.
Just the other day, I think it was yesterday, the government launched the Konza City Call Center, and it's going to be the biggest in Kenya and I think the region. What have you experienced in terms of government support for the industry?
Definitely there is the prominence for the industry. Some of the things like right from laying the under fiber cables, undersea fiber cables, submarine cables, wherein we can even go and talk to a potential buyer, telling that we can have a point-to-point connectivity between Kenya to some of their servers in Europe or in America, because there is infrastructure which is available, and the prominence that is given even with the Vision 2030 to have the presidential digital program and things of that sort, it has really made those building blocks ready. So unless you have the confidence that whatever the sales pitch you are making to attract a prospective customer, but you are not sure that whether I can deliver it or not, you cannot go with that confidence. So when you have such building blocks ready, whether it is connectivity, whether it is the national data security policy, whether it is in terms of the stability in the economy, the kind of perks that is being provided for export of services, so these are all the things which really makes it worthwhile ingredients to package that model and talk to a prospective buyer that this country is ready. We have the resource, not just the human resource, but also the resource that is needed for delivering those requirements.
When you talk about the business environment to support the industry and even the policy environment, there's, I don't know, I'm sure you've you've gone through the ICT bill, and the industry is a bit, divided on what to say about this bill. What are your views on that bill that requires that IT professionals have to be licensed annually? There's the issue of the training requirements for IT professionals. There's a lot in that bill, but what is your view on it?
At times, I would say these are all some of the things that are needed in terms of convincing for an international market, because when somebody who is an international buyer, like even you have seen in the news that Microsoft came into this country, Google came into this country, these are some of the things which are now known. But there are a lot of artificial intelligence companies who are working either through a crowdsourcing kind of a model, because they have identified that the country has got what it requires in terms of giving them that reassurance that I can work even with people sitting at home, because you have the basic requirements of what I mentioned, the data security aspects of it, or whether the talent, whether the methodology where they can vet whether this individual is really credible, or is telling what the certificate is talking about. So these are all some of the things which are really making it ease for convincing the international community, because even a smallest of the mistake in some of the industries can go for a lawsuit of millions together. So for such industries to come and work in a country which is not that exposed, or not that much in the mainstream from historically, is a really great achievement towards which we are heading to. That's what I can really say about. So when you talk about these bills, yes, there can be further refinement to such bills, but you need a point where you will start something so that there is a convincing point, or there is a gradual curve which can go and talk to these prospective customers, telling that, if you want to come and operate in a country, because when we talk about 123,000 graduates coming out of the country every year from various different universities here, you need to create a demand aspect of it as well. You are preparing a lot of supply. So when you want to create a demand, you need to have buyers who can employ them. Otherwise, like I said, there will be a lot of the parallel employment which will create, whether it is through drivers. People would have a degree and they will look for buying a car and putting into the Uber.
Okay.
So that's not what we intend to do, right?
All right. Yeah, this conversation will continue in a little bit. We are having a conversation about business process outsourcing, specifically in the IT sector. And we are talking with Vinay Subbaramaiah, the BPO director at Technobrain. And we have talked about quite a lot. Please do interact with us on Twitter. We are at KBC Channel 1. My Twitter handle is at Betty Kiptum. And tell us what you think. Have you handled BPO before? Does your company outsource? What challenges do you face? And we shall be talking about them in the middle of this program. Well, Vinay, let's pick it up from there. What are the challenges that you face even in this sector as the BPO director?
Right. Definitely is, when I say it is outsourcing and has a lot of dependency on human resource, retaining the talents is one of the biggest challenge. First of all, in some space like what we are venturing into in terms of IT testing or IT development, finding employable resources with the right skills is also one of the challenges. No matter how much you can try to have a newer model or an out-of-box kind of a thinking to try and get the right resources, whether you go and do a campus recruitment, whether you do a bit of boot hiring, or making sure that you run a hackathon and things like that. Still, when you want certain resources, certain skill sets, which we think that because of the kind of educational background they might be having, that they might be ready for such skills, it still becomes a bit challenging when trying to get the requirement from a buyer and trying to match with whatever the skills is required. So that's a space where we are working hard to make sure that we build in the right employable curriculum, so that it's like job-oriented courses. No matter how much of education and the skills that you have gained through universities, there are certain things which requires a bit of polishing and making sure that you align with the requirements, how you can deliver to those requirements. So these are the two major challenges that as an outsourcing professional we face: finding the right talent and retaining the right talent. Because once they get to that maturity, or that okay, now I can manage it by myself, they keep looking for hopping around and then looking for other opportunities or trying to become freelancers. So when you are getting an international player, probably a Fortune 50 company or a Fortune 500 company, it takes a lot of hardship to convince them. First of all, to come out of their comfort, which can be America or Europe for this matter, and come to an offshore location and an African location and Kenya. I mean, when you drill down the probabilities and the aspects, you have taken a lot of hardship to get them to where you want the services to be delivered from. But when you have these challenges which you don't foresee when you are trying to look for such opportunities, because when there is no opportunity, you have a lot of people coming in and dropping their CVs and would be willing to work. But when they start getting to that momentum and they feel that, okay, now it becomes difficult for an organization to hold these talents. That too, when competitors are coming into the market, the global competitors, the direct companies are entering to the market, obviously the challenge of talent retention becomes a big challenge.
Let's talk about the issue of finding the employable skills that you've mentioned. You've said there are some programs that they have to go through after university. I mean, isn't there an opening for the curriculum in the university to match the services or the skill set that is required when they come out here? And what is the industry doing to ensure that what is being taught in school, I mean, there are universities that have everything with IT, you know, you're taking bachelor of including whatever it is with IT, that when they come out, those skills are actually what the market requires. Is the industry doing anything?
Yes, I mean, you know, this is where you need to look at the book of lesson learned. When you talk about how the industry has grown in some of the mature markets, what to talk about, be it India, Bangladesh, Philippines, all these countries, I think that's where a lot needs to be borrowed from to make sure it's not just the responsibility or an attractive proposition for providers like us, but it can also be a good proposition for the universities to think about. Because, you know, let me tell, when I was pursuing my undergraduation, companies like Infosys and TCS, they used to come and set up training centers within the colleges and train the candidates who are in the final year of their undergraduation to the skills what they feel would be needed for them to recruit these candidates after their graduation. So, and again, then it became so much aligned with the universities that they started adopting these things as an autonomous learning for their students. So that phase of adoption to what is required, yes, you might be making somebody learn a C programming or a Java programming, but how much of it can be used for a real-time development need that might come to work in your country is what needs to be ascertained and adopted in the curriculum, whether it is through the organizations like us who are looking for talents or through universities who are having that responsibility of preparing employable talents out there.
Of course, even after the university education, you know, this sector keeps evolving quite a lot. So there is constant need to upskill and, you know, learn new skills and grow. Is this happening in the sector, and are the professionals that are there intentionally looking for new knowledge?
Definitely, I would say, because, you know, with the advent of e-learning, I think that's where even the pandemic came as a blessing, because, you know, universities were closed down, the formal learning or the offline learning took a toss during the pandemic. So even parents who would avoid their kids getting onto digital tablets and other things, there was no way out. I mean, you had to let them learn through an iPad or a tablet. So this was not just the thing which happened for the informal learners, but also for the professionals who had certain skills, who saw a need of remote working requirement coming into place so much, started looking at various alternate options for them to upskill. It also gave an opportunity for a lot of e-learning platforms to come up with curriculum which can make them more employable. And think about having a lot of other skills. That's where even the automation thing came into such a boom, that when you are trying hard to convince an organization to adopt for automation, the smallest of the organizations started looking for it, whether it is in terms of the bot adoption in handling their day-to-day activities or customer interactions. There came a lot of trend towards that, which made people unlearn whatever they had learned and learn new things. So that way, I think a remarkable effort has been put from the individuals as well as organizations to make sure that they correct themselves. Because everyone was talking about digital adoption, but it really happened during pandemic. So that way, I think it's happening very much.
The beauty about these industries is that you don't really have to go to school for you to learn the skills. I mean, there are programs out there that you can just self-learn and teach yourself if you're dedicated enough.
True.
With Kenya's high unemployment rate, do you think this is one of the industries that can strongly play a role in solving the problem?
Definitely. I would put my 200% behind that.
Okay.
Because, like I said, it's not just the talent availability, it's also the infrastructural availability, which is making it more attractive proposition. The cultural bridge which is there to meet the requirements of an European or an American perspective. So these are all some of the basic ingredients which is already there. So it's now about how vocal we can be in terms of marketing this, and how the industry can come together. I mean, see, when you look into, again, I go back to reference of some of the markets which has really taken advantage of this requirement. So there is NASDAQ in India, which is a marquee body which brings in all the professionals together. There is BPESA in South Africa. Okay. There are similar bodies in Philippines, Egypt, and other countries who come together, who bring all the players of the industry and go as one force to the buyer's market to talk about the advantages of the country, the kind of skill set. One organization can get benefited or one cannot get benefited because based on their competitiveness. So, but having such marquee institution plays a key role in terms of attracting, because they, if there is a challenge, like one of the questions you asked about the ICT bill, how promoting it is, or how much of pros and cons it has for the sector. So when you have such collective minds from the industry working towards a common goal, it brings in a lot of value proposition. That's one area is where I feel as Kenya we need to come together and have a combined force or a combined voice to go and get the international attention, so that even the buyers will get that I'm not dealing with an individual organization, but I'm dealing with a consortium of the organization or an organizational marquee body which is helping in terms of underlying any challenges that the buyer might face or might highlight, which can be addressed in a collective manner.
So definitely this could be the answer to the unemployment issue we have.
100%.
Right. In studio here, we are having a conversation about matters business process outsourcing with Vinay Subbaramaiah. He is the BPO director at Technobrain. Thank you for staying with us, Vinay. Let's talk about, you mentioned that the industry does not, or has, many people are not aware of what they are doing. Is there anything the industry is doing to market itself and package itself?
I would say yes. I mean, there are bodies like ICX and some of the limited ones in the market who are talking about adoption of this. And there are also some of the UN projects like Netherlands Trust Fund, which came in and tried helping the sector to come together and even build a website to start doing a bit of e-commerce on that. So there are efforts being put, but in very little bits and pieces around that.
Little bits and pieces. And what more should be done?
Definitely, like I said, mentioned earlier, a marquee body, setting up of a marquee body, or even when we look into a neighboring country like Uganda, the National Institute, the NITA, National Information Technology Authority, is taking that lead to bring in all the players from the sector, so that they can go as one visible force, try to promote and market the sector. Some of the things like that, which we can even borrow from some of the neighboring countries, whether it is Rwanda Development Board, which is taking that kind of an initiative from the country. So some of these initiatives are also needed in Kenya, wherein prominent players are taken into that fold and start pushing towards as a country to attract more businesses or more buyers to come and engage with the sector here.
You've talked a lot about the outsourcing by international companies. How about outsourcing by now the local companies in Kenya, outsourcing these services to BPOs?
It's a great question. When you look into the domestic market trying to outsource, definitely the objective of outsourcing needs to be clearly ascertained.
Okay.
Because some organizations would want to go for an outsourcing to cut the cost, not definitely to improve on the productivity or the serviceability.
Okay.
So that way, I'll go back to one of your questions where you said that isn't this letting to a lesser earning potential for an individual? Because when you are talking of an outsourcing, when you are talking of trying to get more employment, you also need to see how we can improve the lifestyle or take somebody from a different level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to a higher level. So when you are trying to get to that domestic market fight, which mostly is because of the cost of operation. When you try to do it, you obviously go competitive in terms of pricing. So when an organization wants to go competitive in terms of pricing, you have to cut certain corners. You have to cut in terms of the salaries, or you have to cut in terms of some of the benefits. So which really doesn't help in growing the sector or giving the right platform or an encouragement for an individual to take up this line of service or career. But it can work when tier 2 centers can come up. Like what happens now even in Kenya, the outsourcing is predominantly limited to Nairobi. So which means somebody who is studying in upcountry or somebody studying in coastal and having an aspiration to work in an outsourcing industry or planning to become a developer or a tester, they have to migrate to Nairobi, wherein you have the lifestyle which is a bit expensive, the cost of living is higher, the centers where these operations will happen are quite far from the places where they can live. So you need to have a balance. So instead of having a migration of talents to the major cities, if the organizations can think of doing a reverse migration, where you are taking the employment opportunity to a place where you say that, okay, there might be 400, 500 graduates coming out of a university from that place. Can we set up an incubation center out there and start working for a domestic requirement? That really makes sense.
Okay.
Because you are actually justifying the objective of an organization, which might be to reduce the cost of operation, but also creating decent employment.
So as we come to a close of this conversation, what are the things that you want to see happen in this industry moving forward?
I would definitely talk about marketing the potential, because when you have that potential, right forum to market that in the right arena, where the potential buyers are there, that needs to definitely happen. And in terms of certain aspects of principles that needs to come in the players in the sector to make sure that we don't try to poach talents just because we have got an opportunity and poach unethically, without even letting those talents serve the rightful notice period, so that you can actually plan for somebody else to be groomed up to take up their roles is one of the challenges. So certain sanity around that has to come in. So these are the two major critical aspects. One, to make sure that we attract buyers. Two, to make sure we have the talent retention or talent exit principles followed very thoroughly.
Those are the things you'd like to see changing in the near future. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us, Vinay.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.
I have been speaking with Vinay Subbaramaiah, the BPO director at Technobrain. We have talked about business process outsourcing, just what it is and what is happening in the industry. Most of the companies that are taking up these services are international, and the local market needs to do something, including improving their budgets for outsourced services. Well, this has been BizCheck. You have been watching for the past 2 hours. Thank you very much for your valued company. From the team that made this possible, we wish you a great afternoon. My name is Kiptum. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.